Raeliff could feel Finley seething. The young man did not trust him, which was wise. When one had knowledge that others didn't, in Finley's case, knowledge of the location of a rift to Illithor, others would surely come to get that knowledge, i.e., Raeliff himself. It was lucky that everyone else was a fool and hadn't recognized the magnitude of what Finley had found. Finley could have been lulled into a false sense of security by all of these idiots, believing that this knowledge wasn't useful. But that had not occurred. No. Finley had become highly alert the moment that Raeliff had honed in on his sketches, which just confirmed Raeliff's intuition that the young man was extremely intelligent. Even those who might realize that Finley had seen Illithor likely thought that since the rift Finley had seen was now closed, it was useless to know where that rift had been. But that was not true. If Raeliff knew the exact location of where it had appeared, he might be able to open another. If I want to do that. Hadn't he told himself that Illithor was a poison chalice? Hadn't he reminded himself how everyone who had gone after Illithor had died? Add to the mix that the area was likely swarming with Leviathan because, like Darkhassen, he did not believe that the Leviathan were in any way reduced in the Underdark in terms of numbers. And it made the idea of going after Illithor that much worse. That the Leviathan, or at least some of them, were coming from Illithor made terrible sense. Those damned Kindrith. What I told Aquilin about the Kindrith being the likely culprits in terms of weakening the wards was a wild guess, but it was the most logical one, Raeliff reasoned. What if it were the Illithor wards that were weakened by them? What if Volray was coming to warn the Sun King of that? Not to mention, if Illithor's wards were weakened, then Vex would know about it. A shudder went through him. If Vex knew that someone had found Illithor, wouldn't he return to the city to find out what had happened? Maybe Volray was warning Aquilin of that possibility, too. But it had been over a decade. Yet, what was a decade for Vex? A second in terms of even elven perceptions of time. But Vex had always reacted in an almost mortal way, in the sense that he did not hesitate often. That had given him an advantage. I need to go to Illithor to check if those wards are affected. And that's the only reason I need to get this information from Finley. It's completely selfless. You look a little gray and sweaty, Finley remarked with narrowed eyes. That's rather rude. Raeliff wiped the cold sweat that had broken out on his upper lip at the thought of Vex. I was just calling it as I see it, Finley said, but he actually looked a little guilty at being mean again. He has a good heart. Excellent. The easier to get information out of him. Are you feeling okay, Raeliff? Gemma asked sweetly as she regarded him with worried eyes. Yes, dear lady, I am quite well. It was just a momentary hot flash. He cast a spell on his clothes to have them cool him down. I'm so glad. You still look very handsome, but you did appear, No need to go farther, Gemma. Handsome is good enough. He smiled at her. Speaking of how you look, Finley began, I thought we were done with that discussion. Raeliff glared at the young man. You can't go into Hope looking like you do. Elves aren't welcome there, Finley said. Really? Keeping Arave out? That's quite bold of them, Raeliff remarked. You can go in, but it will be unpleasant, Finley admitted. And you're all right with this? Raeliff lifted an eyebrow. Me? Being treated differently because I'm an Arave? The full irony of this, of course, was not known to Finley. If people knew he was Kindrith, they'd be seeking his blood or running away from him in terror. More guilt filled Finley's face. No, of course not. I'm just letting you know that you likely won't enjoy the experience, so you should go to the palace and not experience it. No, I don't think so. But Rayleigh held up a hand to stop Finley's protests. While I would have quite a good time being ostracized, I do not wish to adversely affect your shopping adventures in Hope. We're not going to let their discrimination stand, Rayleigh. If they discriminate against you, then they don't get our business, Gemma said firmly as she linked her arm through his and looked meaningfully at Finley to do the same. Finley, slowly, reluctantly, put his arm through the one Rayleigh offered him. Rayleigh squeezed both of their hands. Finley sighed. Gemma beamed. I so appreciate the support, but there really is no need. Look, Rayleigh requested as he cast the amended glamour on himself. What? What are we supposed to see? Finley asked with a frown as he studied Rayleigh minutely. Are you supposed to look different? Gemma asked. My ears. I have rounded ears. Rayleigh glanced between both of them. They were both squinting. But then Gemma brightened and said, Oh, yeah, your ear points normally stick out of your hair, but now they don't. Finley sighed. Pointed ears or no human could mistake you for one of us. You're just too... Rayleigh lifted his right eyebrow. Finley ground his teeth. Handsome. But you know that. You clearly know how attractive you are, which is why you used a powerful spell to only change your ears rather than the rest of you, because you're vain. Rayleigh blinked. It was true. A little bit. Maybe more than a little bit. Finley, you're being mean to him again, Gemma said with a shake of her head. He has all this power to make himself look like anyone, Gemma, and he rounds his ears? That's all he does to fit in? So when it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it is a duck. A very vain duck. Rayleigh narrowed his eyes. Really? Would someone who was vain do this? He let a pulse of magic flow through his entire being. He suddenly took over a foot from his height. His back curled forward. His dark hair went white and thinned. Well, it didn't go his natural white, but more steel gray from age. His nose went from attractively patrician to much longer, thicker, and hooked. His chin also extended, and a few long white hairs sprouted from a large mole at the tip. He then hollowed out his cheekbones and made his skin bloom with age spots. He developed a paunch and bowed legs to boot. But it was not just his body that changed. So did his clothes. His attractive tunic, leggings, and boots, all in a deep blue with gold embroidery, turned into a shapeless black dress with small white flowers and a lace collar. A tannish brown cardigan flowed over his stooped shoulders. A cane appeared in one shaking hand, and a pair of small pince-nez glasses perched on that prodigious nose. The look was complete. Gemma let out a gasp. Rayleigh? Finley had gone very still. He was blinking hugely behind his glasses. His first action was to reach forward and poke Rayleigh's cheek. He jerked his hand back and held it against his chest. It feels real. Is that just a glamour or... No, it isn't. Finley shook his head wildly as Rayleigh tapped his shins with the very real cane. It's real. You transformed yourself. He had. It took quite a bit more magic use than a simple glamour, but when one was changing height, body shape, etc., The glamour would fail rather spectacularly if anyone simply reached out and touched him. The difference between his usual form and his Arave version was a simple change of hair and eye color. Everything else was the same, but this was far different. Touch him, and he would feel how he looked. No one, except a very powerful mage, would know he wasn't a human grandmother. Do you still think me vain now, young man? Would you say that of your dear Gran? Raeliff's voice was now that of a creaking elderly woman instead of his own laconic tone. Wow, you don't look or sound like yourself at all. Gemma laughed, completely delighted with his use of magic. But Finley appeared stunned. You did that without any use of rune circles, meditation, vocal spellcraft, or an enchantment. That wasn't quite true. His Adiva helped him to anchor the transformation spell, much like it did the glamour he usually wore. And, of course, it still provided him protection against sunlight. But all in all, yes, he had done it with little to no help. Take that, you foolish Arave. Only Aquilin could likely do as much, he thought rather smugly. It was only then that he realized he might have made a mistake by doing it so easily, because unlike Gemma, who had no understanding of the power or skill it took to cast such a spell, Finley did know exactly how rare what he did was. You must be a very powerful mage, Finley murmured as he stared hard at Raeliff. Yes, of course, he answered and fussed with his dress. But again, I haven't seen anything written by the Nares family, Finley pointed out, frowning deeply, let alone you. No, he wouldn't have. The Nares were a far-flung branch of the Vex bloodline, but of no great magical prowess. Well, not entirely. There had been a few of them in Alduin's court, but that was ages ago, and those elves had died in the Underdark, following after mysteries there. And of course, he had been in the Kindreth Empire himself and wouldn't have been caught dead sharing even the least of his magical secrets. Of course you haven't. If you were a truly powerful mage, the last thing you would do is write about it, Raeliff said pointedly. Finley gasped. Ah, but that's not true. All the greats that you know of. Haven't you heard the phrase, those who cannot do, teach? I know there's a human version of it. Well, it's true in the case of magic as well. Perhaps especially in magic. Those of us who are truly powerful keep our secrets to ourselves and do not write about them or share them with anyone, Raeliff told him. That was most definitely true in the Kindreth. The Arave were more open, but not much. The truth was that the glass scholar Neldor Lorave might be the most powerful of those elves who were open in scholarship, but as to the really powerful mages, he was not among their number. If you want to read as well as listen to The Night Prince, you have two options. Number one is to join my subscription site, wraithrain.com, and read up to the most recent chapter I've written. Right now, the latest written chapter I posted was 117, so more than 100 chapters ahead of this podcast. And remember, you also get to comment. The other option is to buy the books. We release a book every 3 months because that's the speed that my amazing cover artist can produce the beautiful artwork. And we gotta have that. Book one is actually free to get you started. I'll post the links in the notes. So you hide what you can do? You hoard your powers? You don't share your knowledge? Finley sounded and looked rather outraged. His hands were on his hips and he was glaring at Raeliff. Raeliff blinked. You sound as if it's personal. But remember, Finley, that humans cannot do magic. So it's not as if I'm denying my knowledge to you. Because we die if we use magic, right? Finley glared at him more. You don't believe me about that, I see, Raeliff murmured. And why don't you? I'm guessing it's because of Declan. But surely someone as smart as you, Finley, realizes that there's something very off about your best friend. Raeliff thought, but did not say. But then again, there's no one more blind than the man who will not see. Finley's lips quivered as if he wanted to say something, maybe something about Declan. Raeliff froze, and his eyes darted between Finley and Gemma. They were with Declan when the Leviathan had attacked. They must have seen what he had done to protect them. He wondered what that was. But it had convinced Finley that humans could perform magic. Finley shook himself and said quietly, "We'll see if you're right and I'm wrong when I get into the academy." "Indeed we will. In truth, if magic wouldn't kill you, I would wish you to be right and me to be wrong. But it is what it is," Raeliff told him. "Now, am I acceptable to go to Hope?" He spread his now much thinner arms and shimmied in his dress. "More than," Gemma said, and took his arm again. "Gran." "Gran it is." He kissed her cheek, which had her laughing. Finley snorted and walked slightly ahead of them. Gemma and Raeliff chatted amiably as they made their way down the main avenue of Tyrael. He learned all about the interesting characters in her school. He was about to give her some wise advice as to what to do with her enemies when they approached the edge of the magical dome. The dome protected the citizens of the Empire from the creatures that roamed beyond. No Leviathan, or any dark creature, could pass into the royal city. Due to the dome, there was no need for a wall or gate, but there were protectors who patrolled the perimeter day and night. More were present as the king was now in residence in the city. In fact, there were quite a few of them present at that moment by the avenue. Raeliff almost raised a hand to Commander Severin, who was stationed at the end of the avenue, but stopped himself. He realized that his transformation would hide his true self from the commander just as much as it did from the humans they were going to visit. They slowed as Commander Severin lifted up a hand to urge them to stop. Finley looked over at Raeliff for an explanation, but Raeliff had none. He was curious himself what would happen now that Severin thought he was dealing with 3 humans and not with the Sun King's best friend. He'd always liked Severin, but there was nothing more revealing than how an elf behaved when their leaders were not in sight. "Is there a problem?" Finley asked. His voice was already slightly edged. He likely was not used to being stopped, and there was no reason for him to be in this case as far as Raeliff could see. Commander Severin did not rise to the bait, but said simply, "Yes, where are you 3 going?" "I don't see why that should concern you," Finley retorted, drawing himself up straight. "It concerns me because there were 2 murders last night," Severin said. "Do you want to risk that child and your elder outside the protective dome?" "What?" Finley gasped. "Someone was murdered?" Gamma curled one hand around the top of her dress. "Who was murdered?" Raeliff asked too sharply. Then, remembering his persona, added, "Please tell us, young man. We know most everyone in town." Severin smiled at his use of young man, as any elf of his stature was hundreds, if not thousands of years older than any human, even one as old as he appeared to be. "It was 2 visiting Arave, not locals, a man and woman," Severin said quietly. "I'm afraid I can say no more, but I would urge you to remain inside the dome today." "A man and a woman?" Raeliff realized that he couldn't keep his true identity a secret at that moment. He needed to know who these Arave were. He cleared his throat and said in his own voice, "Commander Severin, I require a report." Severin blinked. He blinked some more and stared hard at Gran before stuttering out, "Lord Nerys?" "The one and only. I'm in disguise for, well, no matter. Who was murdered exactly? Their names, if you know them, and their descriptions," he requested, keeping his voice low. "Wait. Finley, take Gemma over there." But I want to know who died. We know tons of Arave, she protested. I'm sure you do, but I need all the bloody details, he answered her. I'd rather a good commander not hold back giving them to me because of your youth. I might look young, but I've been through a lot, she told him, drawing up a few inches. Realizing that she had lived through the Leviathan attack, she likely wasn't exaggerating. I don't doubt that. But you realize that only makes me want to protect you more, don't you? He asked her. She blinked. But I'll tell you what I can after I speak to the commander here. Please, Gemma. He smiled, but since Gran was missing teeth, and those she had were yellowed and ugly, he didn't think that smile had quite the same effect as his real one. But to his surprise, she nodded, and both Finley and her stepped away. He turned back to the commander. Now, who has died? Severin's lips had been curling into a smile at his grand persona, but then when he had to speak of the dead, that smile died. 2 visiting Arave, Lisha Amara and Seth Tyker. A wave of cold ran through Raelif. Those were the names of the Arave who had attempted to rough up Declan the night before. Had Declan snuck out and killed them later last night to keep his secret? No. Declan had been convinced that Raelif had made their proof of Declan's difference look ridiculous. He had made it look ridiculous. There was no need to kill them. Besides, he didn't think Declan was the murdering type, despite the fact that he must be a Kindreth and moved like an assassin. But then he realized that he and Declan weren't the only 2 people who had seen and heard Seath and Lisha's threats. The figure in the woods had too. The figure with a crown of antlers. Who had that been? They had clearly heard what happened between the 2 Arave, Declan and himself. Could they have killed Seath and Lisha? But why? How were they killed? He asked, praying it was a Leviathan attack. Outside the dome, I assume. That would be the only reason Severin would caution them from leaving the city. Severin nodded and pointed towards a section of forest about 100 yards from the dome's edge. He could see Arave roaming between the trees. They were strung up there, Severin explained with a visible shudder. Upside down, attached to the trees. His voice dropped as he added, They were drained of blood. And if that wasn't awful enough, both had their tongues cut out. Raelif went very, very still at this description. It was familiar, terribly familiar. How many times had his own parents done that to servants or lower-level Kindreth who had insulted them, or worse, gossiped about their secrets? The blood was taken because blood was useful in all sorts of rites, and the victims were often bled slowly just to make their deaths hurt more. The tongues being taken out was the real clue, though. That was to warn others that speaking ill of the powerful would always lead to suffering and death. A Kindreth did this. But he couldn't imagine the cool, collected Declan doing it. His secrets were known by Raelif. Raelif had far more opportunities to convince Aquilin of his differences than 2 random Arave did. So there was no reason for Declan to do this. So there is another Kindreth here than Declan and me. Again, the antlered figure came to mind, and his shoulders twitched at the thought of it. It was only Declan's keen magical senses that had picked up that figure. He had not. Lord Nerys, I know how grim this is, especially with the king just having returned, Severin murmured, believing this was what was distressing him. He shook himself. Yes, it is. Do you wish to go see the crime scene? He asked. Raelif very much did, but not when the protectors were there, for there were spells he had to cast which would let him know exactly what had happened, and perhaps who had done the deed. But such spells needed blood, And there were no Arave spells which required that. They also did better in darkness, so you would have to go later, much later, when no one was around. He shook his head. I promised these two that I would take them to Hope, Raelif answered and pointed towards the two young humans. I can't disappoint them. Well, I'm sure that they will be safe with you, but do you wish for myself or a protector or two to accompany you? Severin asked. Gods no, Severin. Bringing a squadron of protectors into separatist territory will likely cause a few more murders. We'll be fine if we stay to the road and get back well before dark, Raelif said. Severin nodded. Indeed, we'll find out who has done this. Don't you worry. Raelif gave a weak smile. He needed to find out who had done this before the protectors did, and that person would need to be disposed of quite fully. How many Kindrith are in this city? I'm sure you will, Commander, he lied, and patted Severin's arm before he turned and hobbled back to Finley and Gemma. Well, who was it? Gemma asked. Definite strangers. Looks like some Leviathan got them, he lied. Gemma's forehead screwed up. But that commander said murdered. When someone dies because of a Leviathan, they normally just say killed, not murdered. You're just as smart as your brother here, aren't you? He remarked, impressed with her picking up on that linguistic trick. I try, she said, and leaned companionably against Finley. Finley curled a protective arm around her. She's smarter than me, actually. I believe it, Raelif said, but the commander is not, which is why he likely used the word murdered. The Leviathan got them. Regardless, there's no reason to be afraid. After all, it is daylight. And I am with you. We can go to Hope safely. He accompanied that last bit with a bow. Again, it did not quite have the same effect it would have if he looked mostly like himself. He truly didn't think that the Kindrith would operate in daylight. Besides, if this Kindrith was protecting Declan, then surely they wouldn't have any reason to kill Finley or Gemma. Although they might think they have a reason to kill me. We shall see. If you're sure it's safe, Gemma said uncertainly. If you would like to go home, Gemma, you can, Finley assured her. I can pick up all I need. No, Finley, I want to go. Besides, if it's just a Leviathan, she swallowed, I won't let that stop me from living my life. Just a Leviathan. But yes, I get her reasoning. She does not want to be damaged or her life curtailed by them any more than it already has been. The three of them continued on with their progress towards Hope, as if to prove that she was not afraid, or would not be made afraid, by the Leviathan. Gemma insisted on walking a bit ahead of them. She would run out a little ways into the fields to grab wildflowers, and then return with them in triumph. She had braided a few in her hair and had added a summery yellow one to Gran's bun. It was when she was on one of those trips that Finley grabbed his arm and hissed, Who was murdered? And don't say a Leviathan did it. I know you're lying. Of course he knows. He really would be quite a good mage. Sad, really, that he was born the wrong species. Do you really wish to know, Finley? Of course I do. I asked. Don't be so quick, he cautioned. And for a moment, he felt like he was talking to his younger self. There is a cost to knowledge. Finley blinked. I can't see how this knowledge could hurt me. He gave the young man a sad smile. Exactly. Finley regarded him for long, silent moments. I still wish to know. He sighed, but the young man had made a choice. He would honor it. Maybe it was best that Finley learned about this. Remember those two Arve who thought to attack Declan last night outside the inn? He asked, keeping his voice low and closely watching Gemma. He waved back at her when she waved at him. Yeah. Was it them? They're dead? Finley's eyebrows rose into his hairline. Yes. Raelif answered simply. Do you think they were killed because of something to do with Declan? Finley asked, clearly having a hard time believing such a thing. but realizing that there very well might be a connection. Because Declan would never. I mean, he's tough. He can fight, but he would never hurt people. Unnecessarily. Unnecessarily. So even you know that Declan is capable of killing. But murder, it is so different. And this is different still. No, I'm not suggesting he had any role in what happened to them. But Finley, you are very intelligent. But you are being very blind because of what you want to believe more than anything. Raeliff told him quietly. What are you saying? But the look on Finley's face, concern and fear, told him that the young man knew what he was intimating very well. You need to talk to Declan, and then you need to really listen to him. Not hear what you want, but listen, Raeliff said. Part of him wanted to lie to Finley, to distract him from Declan altogether. But if Declan was really as clueless about his true nature as he appeared, he would tell Finley, and likely Michael, Shonda, and Gemma at some point. If he could keep that declaration to just Finley, just for a while, they could control who found out about Declan, and maybe who found out about him, which is bloody no one else. But even as he thought that, he realized he needed a plan B. He had always had a plan B all his life. That's what had saved him more than once. But this time, he really resented it. What do you know about Declan? Finley asked. He pinned Finley with a piercing look. The question really is, what do you know? Gemma returned to them then, cutting off any more opportunities for conversation on this point. But Raeliff knew that he had planted a seed. What would it grow into?
This ability to glamour yourself in The Night Prince has always intrigued me. I've often fantasized how cool it would be able to shift into looking like anyone, like go to a crowded street in, for example, Tokyo, and suddenly look like the people around you. You could just sort of like meld into the background. No one would really notice you, and you would be able to experience a life that was completely different from your own because of how people treat you. We've all seen those terrible fat suit experiments, like when Gwyneth Paltrow, went to a bar and put on the fat suit. She was all shocked how people treated her. There is something to be said about that. Like, obviously, her own experience as being thin and pretty and popular and an actress and famous, and then suddenly to be something completely, utterly different than that. And of course, for her, that was a destabilizing experience, I guess you could say. But I would think that it would be completely cool. I'm fascinated to think what you guys think about this. Would you want to be able to switch forms and do all this kind of stuff? Please put it in the comments down below. Also, to the extent you can, please like and subscribe because it does help us. Recommend us to a friend. That even helps us even more. Pick up a book, and that helps us even more. Join wraithrain.com, and that helps us even more. And we truly appreciate everything you've done. Thank you. Bye-bye.